What's up, guys, and welcome back to Try Time Podcast. I'm Matt, and you join me for another of our best Super League 17 videos. And today we're doing Hull FC. And first of all, thank you for all the love and support on the last one of these we did, which was, of course, on the big rivals Hull KR. That's currently at just under 1,000 views. So if you haven't already seen it, even if you're a staunch Hull FC fan who hates KR and wants to be reminded how much you hate those players, go give it a watch and help us get to 1,000 likes on that one. Likewise, if we make 1,000 subs on the channel, we will be doing a giveaway for a rugby league shirt of your choice for next season. So check that out, and you might as well drop a sub, because you never know, it could be you winning the lucky prize, be it a Hull FC shirt, or you might fancy something different. This time, I'm going to try and go for slightly less than 20 minutes. The premise of this video is very much, we will look at a particular club, this week Hull FC, and pull out their best 13 and 4 kind of bench players who are unlucky to miss out. We've done these for a number of clubs: Leeds, Saints, Wigan, Warrington, KR, obviously. Go check those out if you haven't already. And without further ado, let's jump into it. And I am going to go for the fullback, being a man so good he has a man of steel named after him, and that is, of course, Steve Prescott. Prescott, something of a Hull FC legend, having spent 2 stints with the club, firstly under the Hull Sharks moniker in the late 90s, before returning for a further 3 seasons in 2001, following a year out at Wakefield. It's fair to say that Prescott made a lasting impression on rugby league, and certainly on Hull, playing just over 100 games across both sets of branding. And I think the biggest tragedy here was that he, didn't win too much at Hull FC. In fact, he didn't really win anything at Hull FC, I hate to say. As an individual, though, he certainly made his impact on the game, getting, of course, a MBE in 2010 before his unfortunate passing from cancer in November 2013. Obviously, he's got the Man of Steel Award named after him, and at Langtree Park we have the Steve Prescott Memorial Bridge, which, is testament to the impact he's had on the game of rugby and, of course, on Hull as a whole. Joining him on the wing is another man who's made 2 stints, in fact, at Hull FC, and that is Tom Briscoe. The Featherstone-born winger made his debut in the opening game of the 2008 season and stayed at Hull FC for 6 years. Briscoe, of course, made an England call-up quite surprisingly in 2009 in the elite training squad as a teenager, and would debut that year, scoring a brace against Wales in October 2009, going on to play the Four Nations competition for England in 2010. Briscoe's gone on to have a storied career, albeit with his silverware coming away from Hull largely in his time at Leeds and Lee Leopards, winning the Grand Final, the World Club Challenge and the Challenge Cup along the way. What am I talking? He never won the World Club Challenge. He has, however, won the League Leaders, which is what I meant to say, 4 times the Challenge Cup and twice the Super League, as well as a Land Todd Trophy Award for his 5-try haul at Wembley 2015, and a member of the 2011 Super League Dream Team whilst at Hull FC. He's obviously back at Hull now after signing a swap deal for Darnell McIntosh, and whilst with Hull's struggles it's not been as much of a success this second time around for Briscoe, he is still certainly a player who is given his all for the club and is very well liked and respected by the FC fans accordingly. The third man on this list is a player who spent 6 seasons at Hull FC, and that is Josh Griffin. In that time, he featured 143 times for the Black and White across primarily the second row and the centre. And it's centre where he's got into this squad here. The Oxford-born player, who, again, there's life outside of the Heartlands, joined Hull FC in 2017 and was a starter in the 18-14 Challenge Cup victory over Wigan. He ultimately made an impact at Hull FC in every season, and it's fair to say not always the best on the pitch in terms of his impact, In 2020, of course, it was the particularly noteworthy incident of passing Oliver Parsington of Wigan on the head and sparking an all-in brawl. However, these moments happen in a lot of players' careers. It doesn't define them. It was at Hull FC that Griffin scored his 100th career try up against Leeds, and it was in fact the first fixture in front of a home crowd he scored that following the end of lockdown. But yeah, Hull FC, Challenge Cup winner 2017, and I think it's fair to say generally a great servant of the game who is still doing it strong at Wakefield right now. Josh Griffin makes the team. I think the second centre, however, is in absolutely no doubt, and this is again another return to players who've had 2 stints at Hull FC, and this is Kirk Yeaman. His boyhood club, Yeaman played 374 times for Black and Whites, with 176 tries coming to boot. I say 2 stints. It was very much a one-club man from 2001 through to his initial retirement in 2016. However, he did, of course, come out of retirement in 2018 to help the club win an injury crisis. And, in fact, a very memorable return from retirement, beating rivals Hull KR at Magic Weekend in 2018. He spent some time in the coaching setup at FC before leaving to ultimately start a career in the prison service, which is a very rogue career move, and he is, of course, a member of Hull FC's Hall of Fame, and, of course, in this team right here. In terms of honours, twice in the Dream Team, twice a Challenge Cup winner in 2005 and 2016, Yeaman will forever go down as a Hull FC legend. On the other wing, we've got a player born much more in the Heartlands that came through the Rhinos Academy, and that is Gareth Rayner, who, again, technically spent 2 stints at Hull FC, albeit it was kind of one stint with a quick stopover to the Leicester Tigers in between. During those stints, he made around 200 appearances for the Black and Whites and scored over 100 tries. And let's be honest, Rayner was a key part of the Hull FC's success in the mid-2000s. He was a big part of the 2005 Challenge Cup final victory, 18 tries in all competitions that season. And as Hull FC reached the grand final in 2006, Rayner was again a starting winger in that game. And whilst ultimately he didn't necessarily win much more than the aforementioned cup, he was still one of the star players in that team, and of course played alongside the likes of Kirk Yeaman, who we previously just mentioned. One man also in that team is the man I've got at number 60, and that is Richard Horne. While perhaps not the most gifted half-back to ever take on Super League, that doesn't stop him being a club legend, with the Scottish international going on to rack up just shy of 400 appearances for the club and netting 133 tries in the process. He was starting standoff for Hull in the Challenge Cup final victory and again in the 2006 grand final loss. And it's fair to say that Horne's impact goes beyond Hull and again into rugby generally. Following his retirement, he has gone on to coach Doncaster, where he stayed for 41 games, winning 39 of those, so pretty good record, and he's still the head coach of that team, so fair play. Joining him in the halfback is perhaps one of the least surprising players of the lot, and this is a guy who is a former Man of Steel winner and is one of the favourites to do so again, and that is Mark Sneyd. Unlike Horne, his time at Hull FC wasn't spanning his entire career, but he did spend a good 6 seasons at the Black and Whites, playing 175 times and racking up over 1,300 points for the club. The Salford-born halfback was a very shrewd signing for Hull FC back in 2015 after leaving Castleford, and the then very young halfback showed his talents early on. The top goal kicker in 2016, he won Challenge Cup both 16 and 17. His conversions being crucial in terms of taking Hull over the line, something which he has made a habit of doing as well at Salford. And it was probably the biggest loss for Hull FC. And if you said what's one player right now that could probably help Hull FC get back to those levels, you'd probably say you'd take Sneyd back in a heartbeat. And the fact that he returned to his boyhood club Salford for 2021, it made sense for him on a personal level, but was a huge loss for Hull FC. It's also, in fact, befitting to him as a player that in both those Challenge Cup victories he won the Lance Todd Trophy, albeit the selection was of course made before Danny Houghton's infamous try-saving tackle that arguably would have changed that award had it have happened 5 minutes earlier. But nevertheless, Sneyd has just won the 2 team and 2 individual trophies in his career, both of which at Hull FC. Keeping with the theme of marks, we're going to go for a Australian prop. And in fact, this might be the first Aussie of the team so far, and this one is Mark O'Meley, a player who joined Hull FC at the turn of the 2010s and 4 seasons later left as one of the best props to play for Hull FC. And selected for the Exiles in the 2011 International Origin match, O'Meley was rightfully considered one of the top props in rugby leagues in the UK, certainly, which made sense. A former Australian international and New South Wales representative, he came with a pretty glittering CV, particularly considering his nicknames down under were more Ogre or Shrek, considering his shaved head and quite stocky figure. Down under, O'Meley won the grand final for Canterbury in 2004, and whilst he never was quite able to take Hull FC to those similar levels, he certainly was a key part of them being a very professional and very steady side in the 2010s, and it's fair to say that he's the sort of player probably that Hull FC would love to have today, a really hard-working, hard-charging prop who gets the metres in. Ultimately, following Hull FC in 2014, he went back to go to the Wallaroos down under, retiring at the end of the season, bar for one game where he got to play in the local first grade alongside his son, which is, for any ex-player and proud parent out there, an incredibly heartwarming moment. Interesting fact about him, at the time of retirement, he was the last active former player for the Old North Sydney Bears franchise. Random extra snippet in there before we move on to hooker, and this is again probably no surprise that Danny Houghton gets in this team. Again, Hull FC legend, having spent his whole career there, debuting in 2007, and he will retire at the club at the end of this season with over 450 games to his belt. Houghton is probably one of the best hookers in Super League and certainly one of the best defensive hookers of all time. His tackles have obviously been infamous, particularly the aforementioned Challenge Cup final against Warrington, and I don't think there's much to say about this because it's obvious that he would get in this. I think probably the biggest crime in terms of Danny Houghton's career is the fact that he never achieved an international cap, turning down the opportunity to play for Scotland, to focus on being selected for England, whilst being called up for the 2017 World Cup's training squad. He never made the final squad and will retire an uncapped player, which I think for somebody who is a twice Challenge Cup winner, man of steel, dream team included, and 6-time Super League hitman, which I think it's fair to say is an award that probably not everyone out there knew existed, but you know, for the most tackles in the regular season, it does actually exist. It's almost a crying shame that he hasn't ever really featured for England, particularly considering not only his 2016 Hitman win with over 1,300 tackles is still to this day the record since the award was introduced in 2009. Either way, Hull FC legend and obvious inclusion here. Speaking of Hull FC legends, and we're back to the guys who have done 2 stints here. Firstly, I guess, under Hull Sharks, and secondly, under Hull FC, and that is Lee Radford. Radford needs no introduction to Super League fans, having coached Hull FC himself for 6 years between 2014 and 2020 before going on to Castleford for a short stint in the early 2020s. For Radford, he is undoubtedly one of Hull FC's best forwards, and in fact, again, it's kind of a shame that his Hull FC honours list only reads runners-up, losing both the 2006 Grand Final and the 2008 Challenge Cup Final with Hull, albeit he did coach them to both Cup Final victories in 16 and 17. Radford does, however, get the honour of having some success on his CV, winning 2 Super Leagues, a Challenge Cup and a World Club Challenge in his stint with Bradford in the early 2000s. Focusing on Hull at least, just under 200 appearances for the Black and Whites and a further just under 200 in the dugout. Radford is Hull FC royalty, and looking at the way this season's gone, they'd probably kill to have his 50% win percentage back. Sticking with the Hull FC loyalists, albeit this is a guy I think that people think is a Hull FC loyalist, but actually is probably anything but, and that is Danny Tickle. For fans of a certain age who started watching rugby league probably around the late 2000s, early 2010s, this guy was on their screens all the time for Hull FC. And it figures. Just, 177 appearances, 47 tries, 540 goals. He was a key part of Hull FC's team for a number of years, albeit he would then ultimately commit the cardinal sin of playing in 2018 a season at Hull KR. For Tickle, the first choice goal kicker and a player who picked up lots of local awards, particularly in terms of coaches, players and supporters Player of the Year. He started in the 2008 Challenge Cup Final defeat to St Helens and featured in the 2013 Challenge Cup Final, where of course Hull FC would go on to lose to Wigan. And that's kind of sums up his time at Hull. A very crucial and important player for the team. However, somebody that never quite got the chance to lift silverware. That being said, he is still one of the best second rows to do it for Hull FC and gets in the team. Now, back to guys who've had multiple stints at Hull again, which is becoming a very running theme here. I'm going to go for Gareth Ellis as the second rower. Again, played in both Challenge Cup final victories, making 99 appearances between 2013 and 2017. However, when he hung up his boots, little did we know that is not where things would stop. Injuries in 2019 meant he came out of retirement 18 months later and helped them end a 13-game losing run before he would ultimately retire for the second and so far final time at the end of 2020, taking his total Hull FC games tally up to 120. Ellis, great player, legend of the game, and also at Hull FC. I love how I started this video saying I wouldn't do 20 minutes, and here we are, nearly 20 minutes later, going on to the loose forward, and we're going back down under for this one. And this is Jason Smith, a guy who featured at Hull FC in the early 2000s. While again, Hull FC weren't really winning too much between 2001 and 2004, Smith's impact on the pitch was one of the catalysts for the club getting the foundations to make that run in 2005 to Wembley and 2006 to Old Trafford. It was interesting that despite only being at the team for 3 years, Smith was appointed captain, which said a lot about the player's professionalism, his standards, and how important he was to Hull FC at the time. And in just 80 appearances, certainly made the impact. But like we kind of said with Mark O'Meally prior, up until the season before his move, he was an Australian international. He was a Queensland representative forward. It perhaps is not too much of a shock that he got such high expectations at Hull that ultimately he delivered on. And in absence of really any huge other names to put in at 13, Jason Smith, quality player and makes the team. We're going to do the bench incredibly quickly now, considering where we are up to, and the first player who's going to get named here is Willie Manu. A player who spent 6 seasons at Hull FC, making 165 appearances. Manu was a controversial figure off the pitch when he joined Hull FC, however, kept his nose down and his powder dry whilst at Hull. And yeah, a key player for the Black and Whites for a number of seasons, albeit not the most successful period for them, and was very unlucky not to get selected for the starting squad. Another man who again was key, albeit at a time when they did win the Challenge Cups, was Mark Minichiello, the Italian international, despite being born in New South Wales. Minichiello featured 138 times for Black and Whites between 2015 and 2019, winning Supporters Player of the Year and Club Player of the Year in 2015. And obviously, like we say, playing a part in both the Challenge Cup final victories over Warrington and Wigan, respectively. The next man on the bench is New Zealand hooker Richard Swain. Swain was considered one of the top hookers in the league at the time, the former New Zealand international, and was a major part of Hull FC winning the 2005 Challenge Cup, with the charge down of Kevin Sinfield's drop goal attempt at the end that ultimately denied Leeds a last chance of taking the game to extra time. It, a bit like with Danny Houghton previously, some would wonder whether or not he would have won the Lance Todd Trophy had the winner not been announced 5 minutes before the end of the game. Swain was again part of the side that reached 2006 Grand Final, albeit again losing to St Helens. However, he was ultimately forced into retirement halfway through the following season with a back injury. And whilst that CD would probably get him in most of these teams, the existence of Danny Houghton, his successor, relegates Swain to the bench. And finally, the only other man to get mentioned here is Ratu Nalago. Now, Ratu is probably one of, if not the greatest winger technically to play for Hull FC. In his single season at the club, he featured, 34 times, scoring 23 tries. A fantastic return from the former British Army officer who departed the club to go try his hand at rugby union, playing for Bristol Bears, where he still is to this day. What stops Nalago getting further into the team and being considered on the wings, especially given his prolific try-scoring rate? Well, probably because the sheer number of games compared to Rayner and Briscoe is so much less, albeit ability-wise, he probably would have gone on to eclipse both of those. And that is my Hull FC Super League 17. Let me know what you guys think of that and who I've missed, who you'd have put in instead. Thank you for sticking with what has been a way longer than planned video, and thank you for supporting the channel. Don't forget to subscribe, you might win a shirt, and until next time, goodbye.